This video is about finding the percent of a number. So we've looked at ways to do that already using the percent proportion, but we're going to look at a shortcut for that today. So when you use the percent proportion, you can use that to find the part, the whole, or the percent, any of those three. But the percent of a number is probably the most common use of percent. Anytime you're finding like the percent of tax on an item, or the percent of tip on an item, or even the percent off of an item, what you're doing is you're finding the percent of the whole and finding the part. And so because that's so common, we want to show you maybe a faster way to do that. So here's an example where you're trying to find 25% of 260. So 260 would be the whole. If I were using the percent proportion, remember my proportion is part over whole, percent over 100. So I'm going to fill in my 100. The percent is 25. That goes over that. Of 260 is going to be the whole. So that's on bottom here. And then the part is really what I'm looking for. So what I've said to do before is to multiply diagonally. So 260 times 25. 5 times 0, 5 times 6 is 30. 5 times 2 is 10 plus 3 is 13. Start with a 0. 2 times 0, 2 times 6 is 12. 2 times 2 is 4 plus 1 is 5. When I add these up, I get 6,500. Okay, but then I still need to divide by 100. So if I divide 100 into 6,500, it's going to go into 656 times. When I subtract, I get 50, bring down the 0. So 100 and go into 500 5 times. So 65. So 25% of 260 is 65. All right, well, the shortcut is really what you're doing. If I look again at this problem, 25 over 100, if I wrote that back as a decimal, 25 hundredths is really the same thing as 0.25, right? And if I want to make this a proportion, 0.25, if I want to write, if I want to change a whole number to a fraction, what have I done in the past? I've written it over 1. Okay, so when I rewrite my proportion like this, then really all I end up doing is multiplying these two numbers, and I don't have to divide by anything. All right, so that's your shortcut. Basically, what you're going to do is you're going to start with the percent. So if I go back to the original problem, 25%, if I change that to a decimal, if I change 25% to a decimal, really what I'm working with is 0.25. And then I'm going to multiply it times 260. So I'm going to change to a decimal and then multiply. That's basically your shortcut. So rather than having to set up this whole proportion, anytime you're finding the percent of the whole, then all you have to do is change it to a decimal and then multiply it. So you kind of saved yourself the whole division step by doing that. All right, so same thing. I'm going to show you that you get the same answer. So 260 times 0.25 is 0, and this is 30. 5 times 2 is 10, plus 3 is 13. And start with a 0. 2 times 0 is 0. 2 times 6 is 12. Carry your 1. 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5. All right, so 6500, and then there are 2 decimal places here, so I'm going to move it over 2 places, and I can see that these are both equal to 65. All right, so let's apply this to some other problems. In the second example, they're saying determine 175% of 56. So again, one way to remember that this is something you're going to end up multiplying, you're going to change it to a decimal and multiply, is remember that word of. And we said this earlier in the year. Of is another way to say of a number is when you multiply. So we're going to be using multiplication anytime we see of a number here. All right, so the first thing I have to do is change 175% into a decimal. Anytime I change a number into a decimal, I'm always moving my decimal over 2 places. So this is 1.75. And then I'm going to multiply that times 56. So 1.75 times 56. 6 times 5 is 30. 6 times 7 is 42, plus 3 is 45. Carry your 4. 6 times 1 is 6, plus 4 is 10. Start with a 0. 5 times 5 is 25. Carry your 2. 5 times 7 is 35, plus 2 is 37. Carry your 3. 5 times 1 is 5, plus 3 is 8. So when I add these up, 0, 5 plus 5 is 10, 8, and 9. I just want to be sure that I look for the decimal places. So there were 2 decimal places here. There are going to be 2 decimal places here. So 175% of 56 is 98. All right, in the next problem, I'm finding percent of a number, all right? So I can multiply the of a number means I can multiply these together. I just need to change my percent to a decimal first. So this one sometimes confuses people because I already see a decimal here, but this is not a decimal. It is a percent that includes a decimal. So I still, in order to get rid of this percent sign, have to move my decimal over 2 places to the left. So I'm going to have 0.3%. I'm going to move it 2 places. All right, so that means I'm going to have to add a 0 in front of it. So now I have 2 zeros, 0.003. And this is the number I'm going to multiply times 460. So 3 times 0 is 0, 3 times 6 is 18, 3 times 4 is 12, plus 1 is 13. All right, and then this time when I count up my decimal places, 1, 2, 3, I need to move it over 3 places. So this becomes 1.380, or I can drop that last 0. I don't have to have it. All right, so this is how you might apply it to something really you might see out in the real world. So $50 shirts on sale for 35% off. All right, so what we're trying to figure out is how much we would save. So what we need to figure out is 35% of $50. So that's a multiplication problem. I change my percent, to a decimal by moving it 2 places to the left. So this becomes 0.35. And then that's what I'm going to multiply times 50. So if I do 0.35 times 50, I get 0, 0, start with a 0. 5 times 5 is 25, carry your 2. 5 times 3 is 15, plus 2 is 17. And I add these up, I get 1750. There are 2 decimal places here, so I need to make sure I have 2 decimal places here. So 35% of $50 is $17.50. Okay, so that is the amount of money that I would be saving. That is the amount of money that's off the price. Is that the price of the shirt? No, it's just how much you're going to be saving. If I wanted to know the cost of the shirt, okay, I would have to take it a second step further and subtract it, right? Because if it's off, then that's going to make the shirt decrease. All right, but we'll talk more about that later. In the second problem, it says Mark earned 2.7% interest on $110. So this is like when you put your money in the bank and they say, all right, if you leave it there, then we're going to pay you for keeping your money in our bank. So this is interest, basically. So interest is a percent of a number. So this is a multiplication problem. All I have to do is change my percent first into a decimal. Okay, again, so this is one of those tricky ones. I see a decimal there, but that is not a decimal number. That's a percent. I still need to move it over 2 places. So I'm going to add a 0 to the front of the 2 and then get 0.027. That's the number I'm going to multiply times 110. So 7 times 0 is 0. 7 times 1 is 7. And 7 again. Start with a 0. 2 times 0 is 0. 2 times 1, and then 2 times 1 again. And then I could multiply this 0, but that's just going to give me a whole bunch of zeros, so I'm going to skip it. But I do need to make sure I count up my decimal places. So 1, 2, 3 here, it means 1, 2, 3 here. So $2.97. All right, so the amount of money I earn in interest is $2.97. And then the last example, it says, in the last 50 years, the price of a television has increased by 350%. If 50 years ago the television cost $25, how much has their cost increased? Okay, so what you're really looking for in this problem is 350% of 25, or $25. All right, so if you're watching this video and you want to test yourself, why don't you go ahead and pause the video and try to work this out, and then check with me and see if you get the same answer. All right, I'm going to go ahead and keep going. So 350% of 25, my first step is to change my percent to a decimal. And I'm going to do that always by moving it 2 places to the left. So this becomes 3.50 or 3.5 times 25 is what I want to do. So 3.50 times 25. 5 times 0 is 0. 5 times 5 is 25. Carry your 2. 5 times 3 is 15. Plus 2 is 17. Start with a 0. 2 times 0 is 0. 2 times 5 is 10. Carry your 1. 2 times 3 is 6. Plus 1 is 7. And then when I add these up, I get 8750. But make sure you go back and count your decimal places. So there are 2 here. That means there are 1, 2, 2 here. So $87.50. All right, so how much has the cost increased? So if a television 50 years ago was $25, okay, and it's increased by 350%, this is how much it's increased. $87.50 is not how much it costs now, it's just how much it went up. Okay, and we'll talk about how you just are going to add that to find the new price in a later unit. All right, so $87.50. So what is our shortcut? Just in summary, you can always use a proportion, okay? So if that's the way you like it, you can still do it that way. But you're going to save yourself a little bit of time when you're finding the percent of a number, okay, by changing the percent to a decimal and then just multiplying. All right, so hopefully that helps, and we'll see you in class. Bye.